Hariom, let us now discuss the other events of reproduction. You may recollect that the events in reproduction began with gametogenesis, insemination, fertilization, blastulation, implantation, organogenesis, and parturition. In the previous class, we have dealt till the process of blastulation. So we will now discuss the other events of reproduction leading to parturition. Soon after blastulation, the next process is called as gastrulation. The word gastrulation means it is a transformation of the blastocyst into a three-layered embryo. The blastocyst was a hollow ball of cells, and from this hollow ball of embryo, the gastrulation stage converts it into a three-layered embryo. The three layers are typically the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm, the three germ layers. Now, how does this happen? You would recollect that the blastocyst had an inner cell mass as well as an outer layer called as the trophoblast. The inner cell mass moves either in groups or clusters or masses to reach a new destination. Meaning, from the inner cell mass, a group of cells may move to the blastocele and establish a complete layer within the embryo. That newly formed layer is the endoderm, the innermost layer or the endoderm. Following which, another group of cells may now detach from the inner cell mass and move into the blastocele outer to the endoderm, resulting in the formation of the mesoderm. And finally, all the other cells of the inner cell mass will consolidate and rearrange themselves to form the last layer outer to the mesoderm, which is the ectoderm. Thus, the three germ layers develop. This kind of movement, where cells move in a blastocyst either in clusters or masses, is known as the morphogenetic movement, and the entire process of transformation is called as the gastrulation. Notice this diagram. This is the blastocyst stage where it is a hollow ball of cells. Gradually the gastrulation process begins, and see here there is a development of the endoderm. There is a cavity inside the gastrula stage which is called as the archenteron. This diagram clearly gives us the way the embryo transforms itself. This picture is the morula, where there is a solid ball of cells, and then the solid ball of cells rearrange themselves to form the blastocyst. You can see very clearly the inner cell mass, which is destined to become the embryo proper, and the outer trophoblast, which is destined to become the extra embryonic membranes. Gradually, the blastocyst undergoes gastrulation. Here, you would notice that in this particular diagram, there is an endoderm. See, this is the endoderm. This layer of cell is the endoderm. The middle layer of cells is the mesoderm, and the outermost layer of cells is called as the ectoderm. So it's a three-layered condition, and in the three-layered condition, the embryo is called as the gastrula. Now please be informed that the entire process is now happening within the uterus because at the blastocyst stage, implantation had already occurred. Simultaneous with the implantation, there are certain changes that happens to the trophoblast. The trophoblast gradually changes into the extra embryonic membranes. Actually, these membranes do not have any role in the formation of the embryo proper or the proper embryo. However, they are very essential in the formation of the placenta, which is a very vital link between the mother as well as the developing fetus. Let us see what happens to the trophoblast. The trophoblast modifies itself into 4 extra embryonic membranes. They are the chorion, the amnion, the allantois, and the yolk sac. So all these 4 membranes, called as the extra embryonic membranes, develop from the trophoblast. Here you can see this is the developing embryo. Okay, this is the developing embryo in a very young stage, and outer to the embryo we find the development of the extra embryonic membranes. See here, there's the amnion, and this amnion has a cavity called as the amniotic cavity. The amniotic cavity is filled with amniotic fluid, and you have learned that the extraction of this fluid is known as amniocentesis, which is used to detect metabolic disorders or genetic disorders as far as the baby is concerned, and that process is known as amniocentesis. It is misused in certain parts of our country for detecting sex, which is very wrong, and it is totally banned by the government. So this is the amnion. This layer, this extra embryonic membrane is called as the amnion. The outermost one is called as the chorion. Okay, this is the chorion, this is the amnion, and then there is another one called as the allantois. This is another extra embryonic membrane, and further to that there is the yolk sac. Now in the case of human beings, the yolk sac is a very insignificant structure, because you may recollect that the human egg is alecital. It does not have yolk. So though the yolk sac develops, there is no storage of yolk in this, unlike other organisms. So these are the 4 extra embryonic membranes or the fetal membranes. Now why do the extra embryonic membranes develop? The extra embryonic membranes develop because they are responsible for the formation of the placenta. Now the placenta is a very unique structure where there are tissues contributed from the maternal side as well as the fetal side. So it's a complex tissues from the mother's side as well as the baby side. So the trophoblast gradually develops into the extra embryonic membranes, and the extra embryonic membranes are in turn responsible for the formation of the placenta from the fetal side. So we define placenta as a very intimate connection between the fetus and the mother, which is contributed by the fetal and the maternal tissues. So this is the definition of the placenta. Now let us see how exactly the placenta develops. Soon after implantation, the trophoblast, which has now changed into the extra embryonic membranes, starts developing finger-like projections. Actually, it is the chorion, the outermost extra embryonic membrane, develops finger-like projections, and they are called as chorionic villi. These chorionic villi interdigitates, or they establish a very close relationship with the maternal tissues and the maternal endometrium of the mother. You remember the innermost layer of the uterine wall was called as endometrium. In a pregnant mother, the endometrium is now referred as the decidua. So the chorionic villi interdigitates with the decidua as well as numerous blood vessels, And this unique relationship, it is literally, the chorionic villi are literally bathing in the maternal blood vessels. So this kind of placenta is known as chorioallantoic placenta. So the placenta found in human beings are called as the chorioallantoic placenta. And as I said earlier, the chorionic villi grows into the maternal uterine tissue, which is now called as the decidua. And since it is literally bathing in the mother's blood, we also refer that particular placenta as the hemochorial placenta. The word hemo means blood, chorial here means the chorionic villi. So the placenta in human beings is the chorioallantoic placenta of the hemochorial type. So this is a very intimate relationship seen between the fetus as well as the mother. In this diagram, this is what I told you earlier, the decidua. The endometrium is now called as the decidua. It has various parts, decidua, basalis, parietalus. You don't have to learn about the details. It is called as the decidua. You can see the finger-shaped structures here represented in green, which is the chorionic villi. And other than that, we have the embryo developing. There's a very small yolk sac that is seen here, as well as the intimate connection of the developing embryo with the placenta. So this is the placenta. Okay, the placenta is here, but this connection, there's a physical connection between the embryo as well as the placenta, and that physical connection is called as the umbilical cord. This umbilical cord connects the baby to the placenta, and it is through the umbilical cord that the functions of the placenta is established. The umbilical cord, as you know, shrivels, it is cut off soon after childbirth, and a small stump remains there which shrivels off and falls away, leaving a small scar which is called as the navel or the belly button, a beautiful reminder of the relationship that all of us shared with our mother during the fetal stage. Let us see what are the functions of the placenta. The placenta establishes connection with the fetus through the umbilical cord. And it is the placenta which helps in supplying oxygen to the fetus and removing carbon dioxide, or the respiratory gas exchange now happens through the placenta. Similarly, the nourishment of the baby happens through the placenta. So the placenta supplies nourishment from the mother to the baby, and at the same time all the metabolic waste which are generated in the fetus is then removed by the placenta into the maternal blood. You can always see that in the blood of the mother, the concentration of urea would be relatively higher than that of a non-pregnant mother. So these are three important functions of the placenta, and the placenta also behaves as an endocrine gland. The placenta functions as a very important endocrine gland. Now let us see what are the functions of the placenta. The first function is it produces HCG, or the human chorionic gonadotropin, that is a hormone produced by the placenta. HPL. HPL means human placental lactogen. Other than these two hormones, estrogens and progestogens are also produced. Now, what are progestogens? Progestogens are a class of steroid hormones that bind and activate the progesterone receptors. Now, progesterone is the major and most important progestogens which helps in maintaining pregnancy. So progestogens actually activate, and that is very much needed for maintaining pregnancy. This is the third hormone. The fourth hormone is the placenta influences the ovary, and the ovary in turn produces a hormone called as relaxin. And this relaxin is produced towards the latter part of the pregnancy, which is very much required for relaxing or softening the pubic symphysis. I'm sure you would recollect what the pubic symphysis is. It is a slightly movable joint found in the pelvic girdle, and it starts getting, softened. The purpose of relaxin is to soften the pubic symphysis, making it ready for parturition or childbirth. Now, please remember that HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, as well as human placental lactogen, these two hormones along with relaxin are produced in women only during pregnancy. Similarly, HCG, HPL, progestogens, cortisol, prolactin, thyroxine, all these hormones are increased several fold in the maternal blood during pregnancy. So you find that there is a normal optimum level that is seen in all human beings, in all women, but during pregnancy in the maternal blood, there is an increased tighter value of these hormones. Now this is because these hormones are very much needed to support the fetal growth as well as metabolic changes in the mother and to maintain pregnancy. So this is the function of the hormones during the pregnancy. You will also recall that progesterone is also called as the pregnancy hormone because it helps in maintaining pregnancy. Now, usually the amount of progesterone in the maternal blood is found to be very high, and that is an indication of pregnancy. When the blood test is carried out and the progesterone level is found to be in the higher side, that is a positive indication of pregnancy. While the placenta is being developing, we also see certain changes that has happened to the inner cell mass. We saw that the inner cell mass gradually consolidated itself into the ectoderm, endoderm as well as the mesoderm in the stage called as the gastrologic stage. Now these cells, these three layers, namely the ectoderm, mesoderm and endoderm, is once again destined to form certain specific organs or systems in the fetus. The ectoderm gives rise to the skin, the brain, the spinal cord and the nerves. The mesoderm gives rise to the muscles, the heart, the blood vessels, the kidney and the gonads, while the endoderm forms the digestive system, the respiratory system, the urinary bladder as well as the middle ear. In other words, as we discussed earlier, we have seen that the fate of each and every cell in the inner cell mass is already predetermined, and based on the fate, we see that it relocates itself, forming the ectoderm, mesoderm and the endoderm. And from these three different germ layers, we have definite organs and systems developing. Let us now discuss what is the gestation period. Okay, we now saw that the fetus is developing within the womb. But what exactly is the gestation period? The gestation period in human beings is 280 days, and it is counted from the first day of the women's last menstrual period, because once pregnancy starts, there are no more menstrual cycles observed. So normally a gynecologist would calculate the gestation period from the first day of the previous menstrual cycle that she had experienced. This gestation period of 280 days is studied under three trimesters called as the first trimester, second trimester and the third trimester. The first trimester is equivalent to 90 days. Okay, it is equivalent to 90 days or the first 3 months. Let us see what happens in the first trimester. What is the first trimester? The first 90 days or the first 3 months. During the first month, there's the development of the heart. Okay, so it's a very crucial trimester where the heart develops. The second month, there is the development of the limbs as well as the digits. So the small hands develop, the small legs develops, the toes and the fingers develop. So this is also a very crucial month. The third month, there's a development of all the organs. Okay, all the organs in the fetus, namely the kidneys, the lungs, the stomach, the brain, every organ in the body starts developing. They're very miniature in size, but development happens in the first trimester. The first trimester is very important because there are possibilities of drugs. If women takes medicines or drugs, there are possibilities of the drugs passing through the placenta and entering into the fetus. So it is a very crucial month which has to be taken care of, because the fetus at this stage can be affected by certain factors of the mother, especially the drugs which can pass, or certain viruses can pass through the placenta and influence the fetus sometimes in a bad manner. So this is referred as the first trimester. Let us see what happens during the second trimester. The second trimester is the next 90 days, or in other words, the fourth, the fifth and the sixth month of pregnancy. The fifth month, there is a very important milestone, and the milestone is the fetal movement. The mother can experience the fetus moving within her womb. The second important event that happens during the fifth month is the appearance of hair on the head of the fetus. Coming to the sixth month, the body becomes covered with very fine hair. All over the body, the skin is covered with very fine hair. And the eyes, which has already developed, now starts developing the eyelids, and the eyelids are capable of separating out, and along with the eyelids, the eyelashes are also formed. So typically speaking, during the second trimester, there is organogenesis. Most of the organs start developing within the first and the second trimester. Organogenesis means development of organs. So during the second trimester, by the end of the second trimester, all the organs have started developing, and most of the organs are also functional. Let us see what happens during the third trimester. The third trimester is the remaining 90 days. So 90 into 3, 270, plus 10 more days is the gestation period. So the third trimester of 90 days, which is the 7th, 8th and the 9th month of pregnancy, actually during these 3 months, the most important change that happens in the fetus is just growth, because by the first and the second trimester, majority of the organs have started developing, and it has also becoming functional. In the sense, the third trimester is basically just for growth. Most of the organs, the baby can now sense the mother's emotions, the baby can hear the mother, the baby can hear the father's sound, the baby responds to sudden changes in temperature, the baby may even respond to sudden loud sound, which is called as a startle reaction. The baby may start moving around in the womb. The baby responds to gentle, when the belly is caressed, the baby responds. So basically, the baby can, becomes all the organs in the body except the lungs have now started becoming functional as far as the baby is concerned. And in the last trimester, we find that is only growth in the baby. If you look at this diagrammatic representation, you will find that towards the end, the baby is growing in size. And in the initial stages, you find that there is development of different organs. But here, all the organs have started, developing. The baby now has, the fetus now looks like a fetus. And now it is almost completed its growth, and it is ready for birth till the 40 weeks. So this is a 40-week development of the fetus. So please remember the development is from a zygote to an embryo. Zygote is a single cell stage, embryo is a multicellular stage, and then once the embryo starts developing organs, we call it as a fetus. And the development of organs in the embryo, from the embryo, is known as organogenesis. Genesis means to develop, organo means organs. So all the organs start developing, or we find organogenesis happening during the first and the second trimester. The third trimester, there is merely growth of the fetus. Let us see what happens towards the end of the third trimester. By the end of the third trimester, there's a very important function. There's a very important event that is happening, and that is known as the fixation of the head. The head of the fetus fixes itself above the cervix. It happens in almost all the normal gestation cases, but there are certain cases where the head does not fix and any other part of the fetus may present itself at the cervix. Now, what happens at the end of the third trimester or at the end of the gestation period, when the fetus is ready for childbirth, when the baby is ready to be delivered out, there is a response or a reflex which is produced by the fetus called as a fetal ejection reflex. So it is a fetus who decides when the that is at the end of the gestation period, the fetus itself sends an ejection reflex. Now this ejection reflex is actually a neuroendocrine mechanism, meaning there is a nerve as well as the hormone involved in this particular reflex. So it is called as a neuroendocrine mechanism. A fully formed fetus and the placenta. Please remember that both the fetus and the placenta jointly induce a mild uterine contraction. A very mild uterine contraction is produced jointly by the fetus and the placenta at the terminal end of the gestation period. Now, when this mild uterine contraction is produced, the uterine contraction sends the impulses through the nerves to the hypothalamus. So remember, it's a information. The neural information, or through the nerve, the information about the mild uterine contraction reaches the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus immediately stimulates the posterior pituitary. What does the posterior pituitary do? The posterior pituitary releases a hormone called as the oxytocin, and you would recollect that oxytocin is known as the birth hormone. Oxytocin, which is released from the posterior pituitary into the bloodstream, reaches the uterus and influences the myometrium of the uterus to vigorously contract. So earlier it was a very mild contraction. Now when oxytocin is released, the myometrium contracts in a very vigorous manner, and that initiates the first labor pain. Once the myometrium is contracting, immediately the contraction of the uterine myometrium once again sends impulses to the hypothalamus, and then the posterior pituitary again releases oxytocin. So the cycle is continued. So when there is an oxytocin release, there is a myometrial contraction. When there is a myometrial contraction, again the posterior pituitary is stimulated. So there is an increase in the frequency. Gradually there is an increase in the frequency of the contraction, or maybe the first interval was half an hour, then it gets reduced. The uterus starts contracting every 20 minutes, then every 15 minutes, 10 minutes, and so on. So the frequency of contraction increases because of the release of the oxytocin. And this increased frequency, when there is an increased frequency of myometrial contraction, simultaneously the cervix, which was in a in a contracted state. You would recollect that cervix, the cervical muscles were the strongest sphincter muscles in the body. These sphincter muscles now become dilated. Simultaneous to the uterine contraction, the cervix is also getting dilated. And all this, along with that, there is the rupture of the amniotic sac. Remember, the amniotic sac is a sac which encloses the fetus, and within the amniotic sac there is the amniotic fluid. So when the amniotic sac ruptures, there is a sudden flow of the amniotic fluid. So this flow of fluid, along with the increased frequency of myometrial contraction and the dilated cervix, helps in parturition or delivery of the baby through the birth canal. The birth canal is the canal of the cervix, and the vaginal canal together is known as the birth canal. So the baby is delivered out by the head. The head comes out first through the vagina, and the baby comes out, heralding his arrival into this world with a cry. Normally the baby arrives crying, and that cry actually inflates his lung and oxygen rushes in. Soon after that, the placenta, which was a very important link between the mother and the baby, is also released. The umbilical cord is severed away by the physician, and the stump remains. The placenta, when the placenta is released, that particular release is called as afterbirth. So all these functions, all these events that happen leads to parturition, and all these events are called as the fetal ejection reflex, which is a neuroendocrine mechanism. Sometimes the baby does not fix the head properly, and some other part of the baby may present itself at the cervix, which may not cause the normal delivery. So in such situations, a cesarean section or a C-section is recommended by the gynecologist, which involves removal of the baby after a surgery. There is a small incision that is made on the abdomen close to the uterus, and the baby along with the baby's sac is removed, and that process is known as the cesarean section or the C-section. Now, we must also recollect that the oxytocin, which is produced during the final stages for parturition, is very important for continuing the uterine contraction. So there may be some certain individuals where oxytocin is deficient. So the doctor may artificially give the mother doses of oxytocin in the form of injections or in some other form, so as to induce the contraction of the uterus. Now, after birth, after parturition, oxytocin has one more function. What is the function? The function is oxytocin will now influence the mammary glands, and the mammary glands have certain myoepithelial cells. Along with the influence of the oxytocin, the milk which is already produced in the mammary glands are stored in the lactiferous ducts, and the suckling instinct of the infant along with the oxytocin's influence will cause the milk to be ejected out into the mouth of the baby. And the first formed milk, as you would recollect, is known as the colostrum. So colostrum is very important because it provides a large number of antibodies for the baby, which wards a number of diseases and keeps the baby healthy. Since oxytocin is also involved in the release of the milk from the mammary glands, oxytocin is also called as the milk ejection hormone. So it has two nicknames. One is the childbirth hormone, and the second one is the milk ejection hormone. Let us now discuss how are twins formed. Now, in normal situations, we know that it is a single ovum is fertilized by a single sperm, and that zygote develops into a fetus. However, there are many situations where twins are formed. Now let us see how twins are formed and what are the different types of twins. There are three categories of twins. The first one is the identical or the monozygotic twins. Now what happens here is there is a single ovum fertilized by a single sperm which divides during cleavage, and soon after division these blastomeres, instead of remaining adhered together, they may separate out and become independent zygotes. They function as independent two zygotes, and these independent zygotes now again carry out cleavage, blastulation, gastrulation, resulting in the formation of two fetuses which are identical in all respects. Identical as far as sex is concerned, also with respect to the genetic constitution. Because remember, it has developed from one single ovum and one single sperm. After fusion, it has separated itself into two independent zygotes. So we call it as monozygotic. It is developing from a single zygote, and hence they are identical with respect to the genetic makeup as well as the sex. The second type of twin are the fraternal or the dizygotic twins. Here, there are two ovum produced, either from the same ovary or from two different ovary. Two ova are produced, and these two ova may be fertilized, not maybe, are fertilized by two different sperms. And when it is fertilized by two different sperms, there are possibilities of the developing zygote to be either of the same sex, or they may have different sex also. Meaning, since if it is fertilized by a sperm containing the Y chromosome, both the ova, if both the ova are fertilized by two sperms carrying Y chromosomes, both of them may become boys. If they are fertilized by two sperms carrying the X chromosomes, both of them may become girls. Or if one sperm has a X chromosome and the other ovum is fertilized by a Y carrying sperm, then it may be a girl and a boy. So the genetically, since it is developing from two ovum and two sperms, genetically there may not be any similarities in the developing babies, and sexually also they may be either same or different. So we call that as dizygotic. Two zygotes are developing, or in layman term they are called as fraternal twins. The last category is the conjoined twins. When a monozygotic twin does not separate out completely, when the blastomeres do not separate out completely, but they remain joined at some places, then what happens is they may continue its division and remain attached at certain points, which may be sometimes head to head or back to back, side to side. Such twins are called as conjoined twins. It may be possible sometimes to separate them. It may not be possible if they are sharing a vital organ. So these are the three different types of twins: the monozygotic or the identical, dizygotic or the fraternal, and the Siamese or the conjoined twins. So this picture shows an identical twin. Okay, identical in respect to the sex, two girls. Okay, with respect to sex, they are monozygotic. This is a fraternal twin. But this fraternal twin has the same sex. They're not identical. They show variations, physical variations, and maybe even behavior wise. They may have a different genetic constitution. This is again a fraternal twin. Okay, but it's a boy and a girl. So fraternal twins, as I told you earlier, may either belong to the same sex or they can be different sexes also. It may be a girl and a boy also. So this is an identical twin. These two are fraternal twins.